Three people with bolt cutters broke into my family's barn at 5:47 a.m., and I swear to you, the only reason I didn't black out from rage right there on the porch was because I knew exactly who was waiting for them inside, sipping his coffee like it was just another Tuesday. Sheriff Nolan Briggs with a federal arrest warrant in his pocket and a body cam recording every breath they took. 8 months earlier, Miranda Claiborne was just that annoying new neighbor from Ridgeview Bluffs, complaining that my grandfather's weathered red barn was bringing down the aesthetic of the subdivision, rolling up in a luxury SUV, heels clicking on my gravel like she was walking into a boardroom instead of a century-old homestead. Today, she's a federal defendant looking at charges for mail fraud, criminal trespass, and a conspiracy to pry $2.8 million worth of mineral rights out from under my family. And the funniest part is, she had no idea those rights even existed when this started. My name is Colin Hartley. I'm 52, an electrician by trade, and this patch of land in Redstone County, Colorado has been in my bloodline since 1923. My grandfather bought these 15 acres when there were more cows than cul-de-sacs, when a handshake promise meant more than a 40-page contract, when neighbors settled problems on the fence line instead of in HOA Facebook groups. After my divorce, I came back here to start over. The farmhouse sits on a little rise, the old red barn down the slope, a scraggly apple orchard that still gives you decent pies if you cut around the worms. Mornings were simple. Coffee on the wraparound porch, birds yelling at the sunrise, distant hum of Highway 41, sawdust and motor oil drifting up from my woodworking shop in the barn, where I built custom cabinets to keep the bills paid and my hands busy, so the empty house didn't feel quite so loud. Then Summit Horizon Properties rolled in, bought up the surrounding farms, flattened 200 acres of prairie, and stamped out a subdivision they named Ridgeview Bluffs. Identical beige boxes priced like palaces, each one shoved on a lots my grandfather would have called chicken yards. My 15 acres sat right in the middle like a glitch in their brochure, a stubborn island of reality in a sea of vinyl siding. The developer tried to buy me out, made offers that would make most people think hard, but this land isn't a product to me. It's a promise, so I said no. A year later, the residents formed Ridgeview Bluffs HOA, and that's when the certified letters started landing in my mailbox, sharp little envelopes full of community standards and mandatory compliance. I tossed them straight into the burn barrel in my shop, watched the fancy letterhead curl in the flames with the cedar shavings, and I laughed. Turns out laughing at an HOA is like throwing a lit match into dry brush. Miranda Claiborne showed up soon after, 48 years old, hair pulled back so tight I wondered if she could blink, business suit that probably cost more than my truck, waving her real estate card like a badge. "Mr. Hartley, I'm Miranda Claiborne, president of the Ridgeview Bluffs HOA," she said in that honey-sharp voice. "We need to talk about bringing your property into alignment with our community standards." I set my mug down, looked her in the eye, and said, "Ma'am, this place was here before your street, your HOA, and probably your perfume brand. I'm not part of your association, I don't pay your dues, and the only thing I answer to is county code." Her smile didn't move, but something behind her eyes froze over. 3 days later, there it was, my first violation notice zip-tied to the mailbox, citing some Ridgeview Bluffs covenant number that didn't apply to me, demanding I demolish my non-conforming agricultural structure or face $150 a day in fines. Then more. My gravel drive was an unapproved surface, my work truck in the yard was commercial display, my barn was an eyesore affecting property values. It became a humiliating advent calendar. Every morning, a new bright plastic zip tie, choking my mailbox. On top of that, the Ridgeview Bluffs Facebook group turned into her personal war room. Photos of my barn taken at the worst angles, captions like, "Is this what we paid $500,000 for?" and strangers I'd never met calling my family's history a junkyard. I'd sit there with my coffee, reading these comments about my life, hands shaking, half from anger, half from hurt I didn't want to admit I still felt at 52. All of that, the papers, the gossip, the fines, was just the opening act, the softening up. The real story doesn't start until I pulled my grandfather's old deed from the Redstone County Recorder's office, looked at the legal description, and realized the ground under Ridgeview Bluffs wasn't really theirs at all. I drove that deed into Attorney Lauren Pierce's office in Silver Mesa like I was delivering a live grenade. $300 for an hour of her time felt steep until I watched her eyebrows shoot up halfway through page 3. Colin, do you realize what this means? Lauren Pierce asked, tapping a line with her pen. Your grandfather kept the subsurface rights to the entire original parcel, 640 acres. That includes every square foot Summit Horizon Properties built Ridgeview Bluffs on. I'd always thought mineral rights were the kind of thing people in oil towns argued about, not something hiding in my family file cabinet under old Christmas cards. But there it was. We owned everything under those beige houses, and in Redstone County, that actually mattered, especially with gas exploration pushing this way. While I was still wrapping my head around that, Lauren did a quick search and pulled up filings from Claiborne Land and Capital, a commercial outfit run by Miranda's brother, Gavin Claiborne. They'd quietly applied for exploration leases over the same section my mineral deed covered, projected value in the tens of millions over 20 years. Suddenly, Miranda's obsession with my barn made perfect sense. This wasn't about red paint. It was about getting me off the board so their family could scoop up my signature for pennies. Once I saw it, I couldn't unsee the pattern. The fake urgency in the violation letters. The safety concerns. The push to declare my barn a hazard. It wasn't a cranky neighbor. It was phase 1 of a corporate land grab. So I stopped playing defense. Step 1. Cameras. Not cheap plastic decoys, but real, cloud-backed, night vision rigs covering the driveway, the barn, the orchard, the fence line. Step 2. Documentation. Every letter, every social media post, every phone call logged and copied into a file that started to look thick enough to stop a bullet. Step 3. County help. Deputy Marshal Tate from the Redstone County Sheriff's Office spent hours at my kitchen table, flipping through violation notices and screen captures. This isn't enforcement, this is targeting, he said. Keep everything, Colin. People like this don't suddenly stop, they escalate. Of course, Miranda escalated. A fake fire safety letter arrived on official-looking stationery, claiming my barn was an imminent hazard and had to be inspected within 48 hours or the county would order it demolished. Problem for her was, I called the real fire marshal. Deputy Fire Marshal Renee Ortiz came out, ran a legitimate inspection, complimented my wiring and extinguishers, then confirmed what we suspected, no record of any complaint, no such 48-hour policy, and the letterhead logo looked like it was dragged off Google Images. Lauren traced the document metadata. It had been created on a computer registered to Claiborne Realty Group, Miranda's brokerage. That turned a nasty letter into federal mail fraud and impersonation of officials, a completely different game. Meanwhile, the harassment shifted from paper to pressure. My clients started getting anonymous calls about unlicensed work and unsafe conditions. Suddenly, a handful of one-star reviews popped up online about jobs I'd never done, accusing me of everything from missed deadlines to political ranting in people's kitchens. It would have been funny if it didn't hit my income. Then the sabotage started. One week, my cameras glitched out for a few minutes at a time. My internet line was mysteriously cut. A utility truck with no record of being dispatched accidentally bumped my power line. What Miranda and Gavin didn't know was that I'd installed backup trail cams they hadn't spotted. Those backups caught Gavin Claiborne himself at 3:17 a.m., slipping along my fence with bolt cutters, snipping the cable, his license plate shining back at the lens like it was proud to be there. Audio picked up him on the phone saying, "Keep the pressure up, he'll crack. He doesn't have the money to fight forever." I handed that footage straight to Agent Dana Klein from the FBI's Denver field office. She'd already been looped in by Lauren about the forged notices and the mineral rights mess. Watching her face as she saw Gavin cutting my lines was like watching a hunter finally spot the buck that's been taunting her all season. "This isn't just HOA nonsense anymore," Agent Dana Klein said. "This is coordinated fraud tied to a multi-million-dollar mineral play. That's RICO territory." While the feds built their case, Evelyn Park, a retired teacher from 3 streets over, started quietly rallying neighbors who were sick of Miranda's power trips. Logan Mercer, a Marine vet with a buzz cut and a calm stare, began logging suspicious vehicles, screenshots, and anything that looked like intimidation. We held coffee and rights meetings in my kitchen, Evelyn going over HOA limits and property law like she was teaching civics again. But Miranda still thought she controlled the narrative. She sent a new letter on fancy Denver law firm stationery, signed by attorney Harrison Langford III, threatening a $500,000 lawsuit and forced demolition of my non-compliant structure. One phone call to the actual firm revealed Harrison retired 3 years ago and had never even heard of Ridgeview Bluffs. Another forgery. More federal fuel. When a story about rogue HOA president accused of land rights scheme hit the Colorado Sentinel, the Claibornes panicked. They started making mistakes faster than we could print them. Herbicide sprayed across my apple trees. Move carved into the lawn with tire tracks. More anonymous threats stuffed into my demolished mailbox. It was ugly, personal, and desperate. And desperation is when people do their dumbest crimes. That's how we got to the fake emergency health inspection, the bolt cutters at dawn, and Sheriff Nolan Briggs sipping coffee in the dark of my barn, waiting to meet 3 people who thought they were about to finish me off. The fake inspection notice claimed the county health department had flagged my woodworking shop for hazardous chemicals threatening groundwater and air quality, that there'd be an emergency inspection at 6 a.m., and if I didn't cooperate, the county could seize the property for public safety. That's the kind of language they use right before bulldozers roll in. Problem is, Agent Dana Klein already had a wiretap on Gavin's line, and she'd heard the whole plan. Gavin, Miranda, and a guy named Dustin Hale were going to show up in matching windbreakers with fake ID badges, cut my lock, break into the barn, plant evidence of illegal chemical storage, then discover it on camera and call in real authorities to condemn my land. We let them think it was working. With Lauren, Dana, and Sheriff Nolan Briggs, we mapped out a sting that would have made a crime show writer jealous. Sheriff Nolan Briggs and a deputy set up inside my barn before dawn, body cams on, federal warrant in hand, lights off, just one thermos of coffee steaming in the dust-struck beams of sunrise. FBI vehicles tucked themselves just out of sight down the lane. Neighbors like Evelyn and Logan stayed ready with their own phones and eyes. I sat in my kitchen, radio in hand, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. At 5:47 a.m., right on schedule, I heard the metallic bite of bolt cutters on my padlock, that ugly clank echoing across the frost-white yard. My stomach twisted, not from fear, they couldn't really take the land now, but from the insult of it, the thought of strangers forcing their way into the barn my grandfather built with his own hands. The door creaked open, hinges groaning like they were in on the drama, and 3 silhouettes stepped inside. Gavin in front with a clipboard and a fake badge, Dustin with a backpack full of whatever chemicals they planned to find, and behind them, Miranda Claiborne, queen of the HOA, marching in like she owned the world. What they saw instead was a uniform. "Morning," Sheriff Nolan Briggs said, standing up from a hay bale, badge catching the cold light. Coffee in one hand like this was the most routine thing on earth. "I'm gonna need to see some real credentials before you go planting anything in here." You could feel the panic hit them all at once. Gavin's clipboard slipped, papers scattered, Dustin froze mid-motion, hands still in his bag, and Miranda just stopped dead in the doorway, face draining of all color, like she'd stepped into the wrong dream. Gavin Claiborne, Miranda Claiborne, Dustin Hale. Sheriff Briggs continued, voice slow and deliberate. "You're under arrest for criminal trespass, attempted evidence tampering, impersonating government officials, and conspiracy to commit fraud." Right on cue, Agent Dana Klein and 2 FBI agents stepped in through the side door, vests on, radios buzzing. "And on behalf of the United States government," she added, "for mail fraud, wire fraud, and participation in an organized scheme to steal federally protected mineral rights." They read them their rights in the middle of my grandfather's barn, between the workbench and the old tractor, and I stood on the porch, watching escorts lead them out in handcuffs past a line of neighbors and news cameras. For the first time in 8 months, I breathed all the way down to the bottom of my lungs. The fallout came fast. Within days, Claiborne Land and Capital lost its biggest contracts. The Ridgeview Bluffs HOA board called an emergency meeting that turned into a mutiny. Within 48 hours, the HOA dissolved itself rather than stay tied to the Claiborne name. Civil suits dropped like hailstones. Mine, from Lauren, seeking damages and injunctions, and later, from homeowners who realized they'd been used as pawns. In federal court, the recordings, forged notices, survey fakery, and mineral lease documents painted a picture so clear even the defense didn't have much to say. In the end, Miranda took a plea deal. 18 months in federal prison, 5 years supervised release, barred from serving on any HOA board again, ever. Gavin got 4 years plus over $2 million in restitution tied to the mineral rights fraud and sabotage. Dustin cooperated, pled down, and now spends his weekends doing community service in the same county he tried to help rob. On the civil side, we put my mineral rights out to competitive bid. Frontier Ridge Energy won with a carefully structured 20-year lease, $3.5 million a year, plus royalties, carved so the wells and infrastructure sit away from the houses and the barn, with strict environmental guarantees that Evelyn and Logan helped negotiate. We created the Hartley Community Trust out of that money, scholarships for local kids, a fund for the volunteer fire department, a pot set aside to help any resident of Ridgeview Bluffs who wants to fight future corporate nonsense without losing their home. The barn now hosts a woodworking co-op on weekdays and a Wrights and Coffee Circle on Saturdays, where Evelyn stands by the whiteboard and explains easements and mineral clauses to anyone who wants to listen. 6 months after the arrests, we held our first Barn Heritage Festival. Music, food trucks, kids running between the orchard rows we replanted after Miranda's herbicide stunt. Sheriff Nolan Briggs flipped burgers. Agent Dana Klein dropped by out of uniform and laughed for the first time I'd ever seen. Someone hung a small plaque on the barn door. On this spot, one small barn stood its ground against a very big mistake. Some mornings now, I sit on that same porch, coffee in hand, listening to birds over the distant hum of the highway and the closer sound of kids in the garden, hammers in the co-op, neighbors arguing about football instead of bylaws, and I think about how close we came to losing everything because one woman decided property values mattered more than people, more than history, more than the law. We got a clean ending this time. Criminal charges, prison sentences, money flowing back into the place it was almost stolen from. But I keep turning one question over in my mind, and I'll throw it to you. When someone like Miranda Claiborne uses titles and paperwork to try to rip a family's legacy out from under them, when greed hides behind community standards, how far should the law go? Do you think the punishment they got was true justice, too soft, or still not enough for what they tried to destroy?